Hello, everyone, and welcome to Work Done Live, where we discuss all topics future of work related. Today, we've got the incredible good fortune to have Steve Stewart as a guest. Steve personally managed the Grammy Award-winning band Stone Temple Pilots for their first 10 years of their career. And he negotiated different streams of revenue in excess of $500 million, $500 million, this guy right here. And he also has been involved with, let's see, a YouTube channel that had over 350 million views. And he's involved with publishing deals, television production. Pretty much, he's Mr. Entertainment. He's done everything, and we're really happy to have him. So, Steve, thank you for coming. And oh, I guess I forgot. My name is Joe Rogers.
Are you reading this, Joe?
What gives you that impression?
I could give a whole bio on you right now without reading a single thing.
Yeah, well, I would have to read my own bio. That's how bad it is. So take two. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone out there in the internet metaverse. My name is Joe Rogers. My company is WorkDone, and WorkDone is a corporate memory platform which operates at the intersection of best practices discernment and process automation. And as usual, my cohort, Kristen Campbell, is with us today. She's known as the marketing tornado. And it's been rumored that she can actually read people's DNA from 30 feet away, which is really impressive. Rumor has it she. So we're very lucky to have her. And she's from Canada, hence the Eskimo reference. Yeah. Kirsten, good afternoon. How are you?
Always a delight, I would have to say.
Delight. It is true. So as usual, those of you out there in the metaverse, we'd like to hear from you. So feel free to drop your comments into the chat and we'll get to them as time permits. And we'll do our best to respond. So that said, Steve, did I leave anything out of that?
Joe, you left everything out. What are you talking about? We're like friends since we were 13 or 14 years old. So that's number one.
Okay.
You didn't even mention that.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I try to keep that on the down low,
I got it. All right. I'm not embarrassed by it. I'll tell you, Joe's one of my best friends. I've watched him for many years. I went to visit him at Harvard when he was in school there. And I watched some kid named Eddie sitting on a desk in a trance for, I think, like 4 or 5 hours. I don't, this is way before you guys were born, but yeah, good times. I'm happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yes. It's going to be hard to not talk about the past. Steve used to pick me up to go to high school in a Chevy Nova that was completely blacked out. It was like urban assault vehicle before that movie even came out.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to our friend Mick the other day, and I had recently Chrome deleted my current car, which now is like a thing. But you're right. Back when we were in high school, nobody, they're like, why are your bumpers black? Why are your wheels black? Why are your door handles black? And now it's like, now you pay for it. So I'll show it to you next time I see you. But it's
matte black.
All matte black.
That's fantastic. It's sort of like the B-2 bomber. You're like stealth mode all the time.
I was ahead of myself by 30 years. So that's maybe longer. Don't want to date you, Joe. You can date me, but don't date you.
Yeah. You were ahead of yourself by 30 years. I got to think about that. So Kirsten, do you have any questions for Steve? Otherwise, we're just going to keep rambling.
Thing I can think of is that Jon Stewart bit on comedians in cars getting coffee with the Chevy Nova when he tells the story, or no, when he tells the story of like when he had his Chevy Nova in high school and how horribly it turned out for him. So,
Oh,
I don't think I saw that, but I did. I bought it for $500 and it served its purpose, but it was all black and it was a piece of, you know what? And I did drive people around in it because Joe was too young to get a license at that point. I'll have you know.
it's true. It's true.
$500 was more than it was worth anyways.
But you know what? Today that car is probably worth about $50,000. Should have held on to it.
Interesting. Interesting. So the topic today is rights and royalties and the future of work. And there's been, for anybody who's paying any kind of attention ever since, well, I guess for purposes of this conversation, there's the audience who's around before the internet, and then there's the audience who's around after the internet and don't know what it was like before. But when thinking about this topic, I thought it was like I went back to late 90s, early 2000s, Napster, the creation of Napster, and people ripping their CDs, music CDs, and then sharing their libraries, which on one level, it's it seemed like, well, friends do that all the time. They make a tape, give it to their buddy, whatever. But then on the internet, it's like, whoa, it just really, it seemed like it threw the whole industry for a loop. And, it kind of started there. It's like, you don't own stuff. So then streaming, et cetera, Spotify. So I want to give a lead in to make sure we talk about this to what you're doing now, Steve.
Sure. I could take that and run with it, but I won't for a second. But let me address what you said, because I'll forget it if I don't. It started before that, but I think that the idea of ownership is really what's operative and what people are, and I still struggle with it. People are like, oh, that's my car. We'll go back to cars. Well, is it really your car? Can you take a piece of that car and replicate it? Can you take a piece of that car and, do other things with it? No. Is that my CD? Yeah, I bought this CD. Okay, but can I take that song and play it for commercial purposes? Can I put it in my film? No, right? You really don't own the underlying rights. You might own the physical disc. You have the right to play it for personal use. But outside of that, most consumers probably couldn't identify what they can and cannot do with that actual recording. And it becomes very complex. I think we're seeing a lot of that with NFTs now, where there's a great ignorance as to what goes along with this thing that you've bought. Is it just a link? Is it a physical piece of something? Is it something that can be played and monetized and licensed? All those are big questions. And I think when you get into rights of, creative rights like books and movies and TV shows and music, there's a lot of complexity to it. So we could come back to that. My current company is called Vest, VEZT, and we're the first blockchain-based music rights marketplace. And by that, I mean it's a place where rights holders can exchange pieces of their rights in return from users who provide advances and can participate in that royalty stream. And we took what was heretofore a B2B model, music publishing, and chopped it up. We on one side, you've got these huge catalogs that might be $100 million worth of music, and you've got buyers that maybe don't have the resources. We allowed the rights holders, the labels and the publishers, to come in with as little as 1% of those song rights. And on the other side, we allowed buyers to come in with as little as $5 to participate. So we brought and democratized both sides of that market down so that people could participate in each other's work and support each other and profit mutually from that relationship. And that's where we are. It's a crazy place. I think there's a lot of attention now on music rights. There's been a lot of huge catalog acquisitions in the last, let's call it year. A company called Hypnosis out of London, run by Mercuriadis, Primary Wave, Roundhill. There's a number of big publishers that are playing in the space with literally billions of dollars, buying huge catalogs because music is an uncorrelated asset class. And I think a lot of the institutional investors out there are starting to see it as such, understanding that, song performance and over decades is consistent enough to bond against. and doesn't really move with the markets. When you see equity markets go up and down, music rights tend to earn a very consistent royalty level over time. So it's a new class for many institutionals, but people that are in the business understand it. Music publishers have understood it for many years. But I think you're going to see big moves made with, I just saw BlackRock today and KKR coming in into play through some other subsidiaries that they own, buying up into these catalogs because, as I said, they earn money for decades and decades with very little input. There's not much you have to do to earn that money. You could increase exploitation and marketing of that, which will get your returns even larger. But even if you did nothing, those songs continue to be played and used worldwide in movies, radio, TV shows, public spaces, and earn money for the creators and the holders of those copyrights. So we love it. Sorry if that's too much, Joe.
No, it's great. It's great. Kirsten, you want to jump in here?
All right, I've got a couple questions I've been jazzed about. It's been hard to choose the first one, but I'm going to go for it. Okay.
Go for it, Kirsten.
Let's do it. All right. Platforms prioritizing engagement over consumption have quickly turned music into its own fandom. How do you see that shifting music technology?
So you're right. I mean, I think back to the NFT discussion, I think that touches upon maybe a year, 8 months ago, the NFTs started to just take off. They've been around for a couple of years. But the idea that there could be a direct relationship between an artist and their fan without a label or a publisher or some other third party being in the middle had not occurred to a lot of major artists. A lot of indie artists had always had that level of engagement because they were very hands-on with their marketing, hands-on with their fan base, et cetera. But larger artists had hid behind record labels and publishers, not really hid behind them, but the labels and publishers took control of that retail and exploitive and marketing function. And those artists never thought about that. Hence, they didn't know their end user. In fact, the labels and publishers don't even really know the end user because they used a retail network like, Warehouse or Music Plus or Tower Records, whoever that was. Those folks that are doing the point of purchase transactions know the buyer because they've got their credit card data and they're in there every week buying something. But Atlantic Records or Warner Brothers Records or Sony Records doesn't really know the end user, and neither does Post Malone or Drake or Adele. They're even one step further removed from that. So I think people are starting to realize that engagement is key. Obviously, you have to have great content. If you've got that great content source, then how do you engage your fan base? How do you motivate them to support you, to go out and buy your tickets, to buy your merchandise, to buy more music? It's much less that shotgun approach, like you said, like how many eyeballs. Eyeballs are great, but I'd rather have an indie artist with 10,000 engaged fans than a Kim Kardashian with 10 million fans that may not know who she is. They just clicked on an email somewhere, and that's why they're a subscriber. That's why there's a like there. So I think the value of engagement is being discovered even more deeply every day. And I think it's really important in this coming world of social connections and direct-to-consumer marketing. If you don't have that direct engagement, you're going to lose out. I think a lot of businesses that I speak with on a daily basis see that value now. Again, the labels and publishers in particular, they'd love to have that. They don't have it. They're trying to get that now, and they're playing catch up a little bit. And then a lot of the retail stuff's falling away. I mean, I had a discussion with some hardware manufacturers. I think we're down to Guitar Center and Sam Ash as the two biggest music retailers in the country. And even they're going away. I think there's less and less Guitar Center stores, and Sam Ash might be shutting down as well. So the manufacturers like Korg and Roland and Yamaha, they're having difficulties reaching buyers. That was their number one place to stock their goods. You go into a music store, there's all the keyboards. Okay, I can buy one. How do I buy a keyboard? I mean, I guess I could buy one through Amazon, but how do I know which one to buy, right? Where's the engagement with the manufacturer and the consumer? So we're starting to see more of those channels open up. And I think there's a lot of value there that hasn't been realized, because the less middlemen you have in the middle of it, the more opportunities there are for monetization at a higher level.
Interesting concept about engagement. So some engagement is worthless and some is valuable. Like, is there a term for that? Is this something, like if you have, there's someone who subscribes, and then there's like, How do you measure the difference?
Well, there's a lot of, let's just say, click farms out there where
Yeah,
someone says, I've got X amount of followers or X amount of likes, and a lot of those could be botted out, right? Someone hired a marketing company somewhere in a third world country to start clicking through, and there's really nothing behind that. I think early on that was more prevalent. It's being cracked down on a lot more now. But there's still people that rely on second or third levels of engagement, let's say, versus them going out and doing the hard work. I mean, it's to build a real fan base, you've got to engage personally, right? You have to respond to comments, you have to ask questions, you have to answer questions, you have to have a relationship with your fans. And I think most artists are starting to realize that it's a full-time job, and that's exactly what it is. And I think people have ignored it for many years, and the ones that have jumped on it are actually benefiting. The ones that ignored it are paying the price.
interesting.
I love that idea. It's like marketing. There's something similar where it's like vanity metrics, where it's like, oh, I've got like however many million followers, but it's like they don't actually do anything, so it doesn't really matter. Or like, I got 10,000 likes. Yeah, but nobody actually bought, or nobody went to the landing page, or nobody did whatever you wanted them to do. So it's sort of similar to like vanity metrics.
Yeah, I mean, the bot thing is, who knows how many of those early adopters took advantage of that. I think there's an advantage, a huge advantage to having jumped on a platform early. And if you can game that system before those restrictions come in, you've got a huge head start. But yeah, I mean, real engagement, I think, is always going to be super valuable.
Mhm. So kind of following up on the Napster comment earlier and how that sort of segued into streaming, is it comparing apples to apples to in terms of the revenues generated by royalties then compared to now? Is it I heard that the music industry was dying not that long ago.
Everything is dying and everything's being born. Um, it's
Wow.
it's night and day. I mean, a typical record deal in the 90s, when I would say was the last real, old school record business days, an average band might get 12, 13, 14, 15 points. That's 15% of every dollar that comes in. And those royalties could be substantial. So for every unit sold, and this was again talking about CDs that were retailing at $18.99, if you had, say, a 15-point deal, I think once it goes through wholesale, they do some numbers, they take away breakage and shipping costs, et cetera, you might see $1.25 per unit, right? At the same time, people were selling hundreds of thousands of units. I remember Stone Temple Pilots, the band I managed at that point in '94, they had a #1 record in June. The first week it came out, it did something like 165,000 units in the first week. So that's 165,000 times $18.99 as retail revenue. So if that generated, say it was $1 a unit that came to the band, that would be $165,000 a week, right? So it's substantial income. To give you the other side of that, a Spotify play, it varies. Again, there's a couple factors that cause it to vary, but generally it's considered, I think, 0.0005 cents per stream. So you've got to play, thousands of streams to get to, a penny. And then you have to have pennies, 100 pennies to get to $1. Then you have to have $1,000 to get, it's fractionally minuscule compared to what the old royalty rate was. Now, there's other factors, right? You're getting much wider distribution. CDs only went to record stores. There weren't record stores in some third world territories, but there are cell phones there that stream songs. So I think just last year, 2020, was the first time streaming revenues have eclipsed physical sales. And that took 20 years, right? From the time Napster debuted in 99 or 2000, it took 20 years for the digital streaming sales to eclipse physical sales. I don't think anybody really buys physical discs anymore. There's some vinyl sales, there's some downloads, but I think where the industry is going, where convenience goes is streaming, because you can have pretty much every song ever recorded on your device for free or very little money. So it's a hard proposition to say no to. That being said, Japan, for instance, is the second largest music market, which I don't think people realize. They are 83% physical, right? There's only 13% market penetration of digital streaming platforms in Japan. Spotify just started there recently, but most of those consumers enjoy buying physical product. Tower Records still exists in Tokyo. There are no more Tower Records in the US. They all shut down, but the Tokyo branch remains because it still sells vinyl and CDs and cassettes, because that market enjoys having that physical product. And I think they do it a lot also to support the artists. They think they're buying something special. Japan in particular has always been a market where we had to do special products. Every major label act that put out product in Japan had to add special tracks, special edits, special artwork, because they wanted to make it distinct for that market, and they could drive the value up. And you'll see some Japanese imports that you can buy, today, that are 5-6 times what the retail value was. I mean, at $50, $60, $100 for a Japanese CD, because there's additional tracks you couldn't get anywhere else, additional artwork, liner notes, etc. So that was a specialized market. But I think convenience has won over, right? I mean, people can hear anything. Most devices today are pretty accurate. I mean, you've got earbuds and over-the-ear headphones and stuff that people are listening in their cars or on their way to work. It's not like you have audio files sitting down with headphones in the dark of night, like I grew up. But many more people, I think, can enjoy music. I think there's a lot more access to it. And you'll see streaming rates increase. There's also a big push from creators to push the rates per stream up, and they have been going up. There's battles in court right now, and the streaming services operate on very, very thin margins. Spotify, Deezer, Agami, Apple Music, they're all operating on, I believe something like 85% of their revenues go back to the labels or publishers. So there's very little profit margin. That's why you see them getting into audiobooks and podcasts and other forms of content that they can actually have a margin on that makes sense. But I do think that that's the future. I mean, having that convenience, you're seeing it happen with TV also and movies, right? There's less attendance at movie theaters because you can stream a movie at your home. You can watch a movie on your device. You don't have to be at a movie theater anymore. So I think the convenience factor, the consumption's gone way up, and the distribution pipes are much, much, much less expensive, if not free.
So you're making an argument that people don't have to. There's no benefit to people gathering together to experience something at the same time anymore.
No, I think there's nothing like live music. You could stream all you want. There's nothing like going to a live theater production. So I think there's always going to be value to those things, but I think those are still rarities. Even if you're a college kid, you probably don't go to a live show every night. Maybe you went once a week, but during that week, you might have streamed 1,000 songs, right? So the ratio of consumption through streaming versus consumption in real life it's a huge ratio. You're never going to replicate the live experience, especially in music. And in music, every show, most shows are different. You're to the point now where there's so much programming going on that, you could argue the drummer hits a snare and the whole show lights up and every single thing is triggered and the vocals are all automated. But when you go see real live music, I think even kids today take a look at it and they're just in awe, right? Someone playing a guitar, someone singing, those are skills and talents that I think bring people together and still inspire a lot of awe and appreciation from fans all over the place.
Good, very good. Well, Kristen, I don't want to bogart the conversation here.
Oh, no. So I'm like, if there's something else you've got, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through my other questions.
Well, there is. So we're talking about royalties. What about on the rights side? If we sort of generically refer to it as intellectual property. One thing I never understood, and I'm not sure it's all sorted out. It's like, with hip hop and sampling tracks, and people are, rappers, whatever, taking snippets from other songs. And I know there were some lawsuits about that. It's like, hey, you got to pay me if you're going to use my work. Is that all settled? Like where it's, I don't understand. Explain it.
As someone who used to clear rights, I came up as Ice-T's manager's assistant, and we did a lot of work with early rap artists. And I personally remember one of Ice's producers, DJ Aladdin, coming in with literally a crate of vinyl records. He was a DJ. And he said, I'm using these records in these songs. I said, well, which ones? He's like, I don't know if I remember. I said, well, you have to remember, because every time you use a recording that someone else made or that someone else owns, we have to get permission. It was a concept that he was very young, and most kids don't understand that. They're like, I just see a bunch of music. I love it. I put it together. It sounds amazing. And that's what he did. But I had to work with him to figure out which songs and snippets of songs he had put in these songs, and then find out who owned them, contact who owned them, and negotiate a deal to compensate them for the use in another artist's music that's getting put out on, Sire Records. So it was onerous. I remember there was a track from War, Why Can't We Be Friends, and Lowrider, and a bunch of other cool songs, which that group had, I think, 12 or 13 members in it, if I recall. And to negotiate with them, one of their terms that was a deal breaker was we all have to be in the music video. So if you use any piece of our song, every member of the band must be featured in a music video for that song. I said, it's going to be impossible, right? Those guys, I think, lived on the East Coast. We'd have to fly them to LA. We'd have to put them, it was, I said, is there any way around that? They said, nope, this is what the band wants. That's it. So take it or leave it. And we had to take that track out of the song. Fast forward to today, it is still a major issue. You still see lawsuits and litigation every week coming up over, and I think it's gotten worse. Songs that are now influenced by other songs. You can look at the Blurred Lines, Marvin Gaye track, Robin Thicke. There probably was not actual sampling. There probably was not actual taking of someone's recording and putting it in another recording. But the spirit of that song was very similar. The sounds and the instrumentation they use and the phrasing they use in that song, very similar. So similar that the courts decided it's an infringement, and Marvin Gaye's estate is due some compensation. I don't know if I agree with that. I do see the hard line where if it's someone's recording and you don't own it, you should compensate them for it, period. If it's something that inspires you to do something that's in the same realm, I mean, there's plenty of authors and playwrights and screenwriters and films and TV shows that are inspired by other shows and other books and other pieces of music. And if I would argue that every artist is inspired by some other artist and is learned from them or absorbed how their work, some part of their work, and it influences them in some respect forever. So then you go into degrees of how much influence, right? You were 18 years old. You've only started playing music since you were 15. So there's 3 years of influence. You didn't use any of the actual recording, but you listened to a lot of Led Zeppelin. This is a big infringement. It's hard to start arguing fine points once you get beyond that bright line of, did you use the recording, yes or no? Right. So I personally think that if you intended to copy something and intended to infringe, that's a problem. And if you actually used some of the actual recordings, that's a problem. But if I grew up playing Zeppelin, and that's why my guitar style sounds like Jimmy Page, a lot of kids sound like Jimmy Page. So I think that's a harder one to argue. But it is still a big problem. I think some of the solutions are going to be in the technology. There is technology now where you can add an NFT or a token layer to each element of the song. I'm working on a project like that right now, where stems, which are the building blocks of songs, just like certain code is the building blocks of software. A song is comprised of drum line, bass line, vocal line, keyboard line, what have you. When you start to add those together, you have the full song. Each one of those pieces can be tracked, right? You can actually make and tokenize each one of those pieces. Most people are playing and using those songs now through digital platforms, which obviously are trackable. So Spotify knows exactly when and where the song was played. There's no issue with finding out where that was. They know who the rights holders are of that song, and there should be no issue with figuring out how to compensate them properly. The technology. What's that?
For those who don't know, can you give an overview of what an NFT is?
Sure. An NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's technically a digital marker that can be used to track something through a blockchain. That's probably the most 30,000 foot description I can give on it, but it allows you, and we're going back to blockchain, it allows you to identify a file or a piece of information in a chronological block that's traceable, that's supposedly immutable. It has to be agreed upon by all the nodes that are involved in that blockchain, and therefore it's pretty secure. Bitcoin is based on blockchain. I think blockchain was created to support Bitcoin originally. But it's got many uses in rights management. It's basically a digital ledger. And NFTs are the representation of data on that digital ledger. Now with Bitcoin being the first cryptocurrency, and I think first use of blockchain in that fashion, it didn't allow certain aspects and feature sets, but Ethereum came along, and I think it was the ERC20 protocol first allowed what's called smart contracts to be used on that chain. So not only can you see it and identify a piece of data, but you can instruct an if-then operation on that data. So it might say, if this song is played on Spotify, do this, then pay X, right? If it's not played on Spotify, don't pay anything. Or if Spotify is asking to play the song, then allow it if this payment's been made. Or when this song is used, a payment is being discerned, use these splits for payment distribution. So it allows a whole layer of operations to happen, and it's carried with the data, which is far different from how things happen today. So today, again, a song might be played in a bar in Berlin. Gemma, who is the German PRO, would license, take an annual license from that bar, and say the bar has, 50 seats in it. They say, okay, 50-seat bar in Berlin, annual license is $2,000, right? That bar pays Gemma $2,000 as a whole sum. At the end of the year, they go, how many songs are played in this bar? And they figure, okay, 2,000 songs are played. Each song is worth X. Out of that $2,000 license, each song gets this much prorated, and then they send that payment out. It's a very rough estimation, and part of me believes that those things are just kind of made up, because it's very hard to track that. Prior to digital distribution, it was almost impossible to track that. Someone had to log in each play, or they would just say, blanket license, we're going to use other numbers and other territories and say, these are the most popular songs, 1 through 100,000. We're going to rank them, and we're going to pay everybody based on that. Now there's a movement afoot to pay per use, which I think is accurate. So instead of just saying, we're going to give you a split based on global usage, we're only going to pay every time you use the song. So if that bar only played one song all day and all night, that one artist would receive that entire $2,000 license. Right now, that $2,000 license is being split up amongst every artist, because these companies assume that every song is being played in the same ranking as was the top 100,000 plays, right, which may not be the case, right? That bar might be a 50s surf bar, right? And all they play is 50s surf music, and that's it. And if it was a country song from 1985, it never got played there, right? So why should some of that license money go to a country artist that has plays elsewhere in the world, when in fact that bar never played those songs? So technology is allowing more accurate payments, more timely payments, and ways to identify, back to your question about the sampling, each piece of the song as it's being used. With Shazam, you can hold your phone up and identify a song in probably 2 seconds. So pieces of songs that are used are much more identifiable now. There's still people trying to hide them. I see big brands every quarter with an ad that I hear the song on TV and I'm like, that sounds just like this piece of music. And with STP, I had that experience. Someone took Interstate Love Song, which was one of their big songs, and it was a beer company, and literally ripped it off. I mean, they created a song that sounded close enough for the average listener to think it was the same song. Same key, same instrumentation, same phrasing. And they had musicologists go in and alter that song. I think 20% was the test that the government said if it was more than 20% different, then it wasn't an infringement. But this is an intentional opportunity for them to copy something. They weren't just coming upon it by accident. They were intentionally engineering a song that was 21% different so that they could take advantage of that melody or that sound alike for their commercial, because they didn't want to pay $1 million license to the artist. They knew they could hire, a band for probably $10,000 to create this song and save that $1 million in licensing fees. The right way to do it is pay the artist the proper license, because the value that brand's getting from that song is huge. And if you're Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch, I mean, $1 million, really. I mean, you're the largest alcohol company in the US. What's the problem, right? If someone's going to pay that fee, it should be you. But they do what they can to skirt that. But again, nowadays technology is enabling people to find those things more readily, and I think take some of those payments back to the creators that deserve them.
Maybe there's a whole market there for near hits.
There is. That's what I'm telling you. These big brands, car companies, beer companies, food companies are doing that every year. I see it all the time. I hear something, I'm like, that's the song. I listen more closely. I'm like, it sounds like that song, but it's not. And they do that because they know that song's so popular, it will grab your attention and you'll, hopefully pay attention to their product. That's the whole purpose, and they should pay for that. That's my point.
Sure. Or, I mean, it seems like a quixotic sort of, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but it's going that way. You could use AI to make near hits.
It's true. And as a fan of cover bands, I'm one of the first to tell you that I enjoy seeing other versions of that song, other musicians playing that song, because I think there's something added to it in each case. So I'm not opposed to that, but I do think the original composers are due compensation for work.
Absolutely. What do you think?
Right. As the ghostwriter who often lets other people take credit for my work, I wholeheartedly concur. So yes. That actually brings me to I've got 2 questions you kind of touched on. I'm going to see if I can get to both of them. Okay, so according to, before I get to that, managing the rights to music in digital ads, online streaming, etc., seems to be a real possibility in the future of entertainment. How can this actually impact smaller creators? I know you kind of touched on it already. This is a little bit of a different angle.
Well, I think, opportunities for smaller creators are immense. This is a new day. Production is basically free, right? I mean, on your iPhone or your laptop, there's music creation software in GarageBand or Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton that you can create broadcast quality pro level songs at home. There's no reason to go into some $1,200 an hour studio anymore. So the production side is nailed. Distribution is basically free also. You can put up a YouTube channel in about 20 minutes and put up any kind of songs or content that you want for free, and it's available globally to millions, if not billions of people. So production, distribution are solved. I think what's left is the marketability, right? There's so much stuff. How do I sort through it and identify what I like or what's of quality? And that's the problem, I think. And that's still where labels have kind of a stranglehold, because they've got the bigger budgets, right? They can spend money on marketing and get you above that noise. But I think never before has those first two gates been open. I mean, when you made a record, and even as late as 1990 or 1995, you had to have some kind of a budget. You couldn't make a professional record, I'm going to say, for less than $10,000, right? That means you have to go into a studio. You had to use an analog tape machine. You had to have preamps, compressors. I mean, the equipment stack to get something that sounded acceptable on a pro level. Then you had to have somebody figure out how to get that out, right? I just made my recording. Now what do I do with it? Who's going to put this out for me, right? There was no distribution channel open to a creator. And it was generally an independent label or a major label. And those are the two options you had. And if you couldn't have access or weren't deemed high quality enough, then they would just close their doors. And then you were relegated to selling them out of the back of your car, playing live shows, doing it the old school way, which is long and arduous and a long, you'll spend 10 years playing shows at clubs before anybody notices you. So today you can have instant attention. I mean, if someone writes an amazing song and puts it up and a social influencer sees it and embraces it, you could have 1 million likes in 5 minutes, right? You could have a streaming hit on Spotify in less than a day. That's never been possible before. But by the same token, again, you're up there with the 64,000 tracks that are uploaded to Spotify every day. That's a lot to compete with. Whereas back in the day of record releases, each major label would release maybe 20 artists on a Tuesday. So you're competing with 20 times, say, 6 major labels. 120 people are competing with you versus 120 million people competing with you. So it's a double-edged sword. I still think that it's a better time for independent artists, smaller artists. You have an opportunity to partner with people. You have an opportunity to feature established artists. I think that happens a lot in the hip hop communities where featuring someone new and upcoming is very popular. And I think a lot of established artists want that new blood. They want that new creative contribution to come into their work. So they're very open to that, which didn't happen before, right? If you were a signed artist before, you were on a tour, you didn't have time to bring somebody else in with you. And that wasn't how people worked before. I think that's changing for the better. You also have access to social media influencers, which didn't exist 20 years ago. Again, you get a Jake Paul or someone like that that's got 20 million subscribers, and they take a liking to your music or your work, and they feature it. You've got an instant audience, and we've seen a lot of successes happen through that. Platforms as well. I mean, I referenced the Dreams TikTok scenario in a call earlier today, where this gentleman's car breaks down. He hops on a skateboard, grabs his ocean spray, and listens to Dreams on his way to his job. That wasn't scripted. That wasn't a marketing construct. That was a real life experience this guy had. That song from Mick Fleetwood, who's one of the owners of the copyright, he said that song went up in value 100 times based on that one incident on TikTok. And that gentleman got, he got a free truck, he got free ocean spray for life. And, he's a TikTok star now, but it's those type of things that weren't possible 20 years ago that you're seeing more and more these days because of the proliferation of social networks and opportunities like that.
To add to your point, what I find particularly interesting, or at least it's the sort of or I guess like 20 years ago, the record executives were like, here are the people we're giving you. You get Britney, you get Christina, you get whatever. These are them. Enjoy it, have fun. Whereas now that whole dynamic is switched, and now 18 million people on TikTok are now telling the record executives, this is who we want, give us more of this. And it's just totally upended that whole power dynamic. And I think a lot of people are not ready for that.
It has. And I don't know that those people are telling record labels what to do, but record labels are taking advantage of those followers, likes and subscribers, and going into that's how they do A&R. A&R is artist repertoire. That's how a label identifies new talent to sign. They used to go to live shows. They used to put their ear to the ground and say, who's happening in this scene in this town. Now they just go online and look at who's got the most followers and most subscribers, and they pay attention to that. So back to gaming the system that we talked about earlier, theoretically, if you've got a way to get, 1 million views, that's going to be impressive to a record executive, and they might sign you just based on that, which it's kind of a thin piece of data, I think. The engagement, back to engagement also, is, I think, what's important. I signed a band to Maverick Records. It was a record run by Madonna and Guy Osseri back in the day, and it was called Wank. The band had a hit on K-Rock, which is a big LA alternative rock station, probably actually the biggest alternative rock station in the country. It was being played 30 times a week, which was heavy rotation on this radio station. They didn't have a record deal. They had literally given their record to one of the program directors, and they liked it so much that they started playing it. And the manager came to me and she said, can you help me with this? And I said, let's go. And I took it around, I shopped it, negotiated a very high record deal for them. I mean, it was 7-figure record deals. And Maverick ended up winning that signing competition, signed the artist. They wanted to remix the record, which, I don't know why, other than it was just, they had to have their imprint on it. I said, the song's already in heavy rotation. The only reason you want to put a record out is so it gets into heavy rotation. You have it in heavy rotation. Why would you delay this to go mix it again to get it back in heavy rotation? Anyway, when you sign a label, you've got to kind of, work with them and do what they say. So we remixed it, put it out, and I had them on the road. We had records in every store, and it was still in rotation at radio. Didn't sell, right? The public just did not engage with it for whatever reason. I don't know if it was no one wanted to buy it because they heard it so much. No one liked the music other than the people that were responding to the radio station in particular. I have no idea. I couldn't force it. I can't make engagement happen. But I will tell you that the label wasn't very happy. They had to pay out the artist on a pay or play deal. The artist did very well, and they should have, because they were hot for a second. And those guys, probably are living very good lives to this day just because of that and the opportunities that we had in front of us to make a deal on at that point at the right time. But the point was, you can't force engagement, and sometimes you set everything up properly and still not get it. And if it was that easy, everybody would just do step 1 through 5 and have success. It's not. In more times than not, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. There's a Star Trek quote, Jean-Luc Picard: sometimes you can make no mistakes and still fail anyways. So true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, all that's relevant. A mistake is relative, right? It's only relative to other success and other mistakes. You make a choice. Who knows if that was the correct choice until some point later in time, if ever. But I like that.
What's interesting is K-Rock was pushing that record, and theoretically, I guess people liked it, but you're saying they didn't like it enough to go buy it, or they heard it enough. I mean, it's kind of weird, right? It's like a kingmaker, idol maker, like, okay, let's just pump this manufacturer. I'm not saying that Wank was manufactured, but we do know that some bands, New Kids on the Block or whatever, or Menudo, they're manufactured and pushed, and people just take what they're given.
Back in the day, that was very popular, and there's plenty of examples of artists being forced down radio's throat, down retail's throat, and you again had a limited number of releases and didn't have the breadth of content that you have available to you today. And you turn on the radio station only plays 40 songs that day, right? And that's it. If you were one of those 40 songs, someone was going to buy your stuff. And the more you hear a song, this is other interesting psychology, I think the more likely you are to buy it and like it, right? If you hear it once and never hear it again, whatever. But if you hear that song every day at 10 a.m., you're like, wow, this is actually an okay song. I mean, you get accustomed to it, you buy into it, and maybe you become a fan of it. So there is something that repetition and being hit over the head with music in particular. And that happened a lot. And there's plenty of artists, I don't know how they made it past a certain point other than brute force marketing, where every dollar was spent and every media outlet was just pounded over the head, and songs got played over and over and over. And that drove sales because there were only 4 records to buy that week or something. So, yeah, it's hard to say. music and art in general is a very fickle industry. It's tough to see. It's not like, I can say I sold X amount of Toyota Camrys last year, and then I can predict I'm going to sell 5% more. It's nothing like that, right? You can sign 15 bands and one of them is a hit and the other ones fall apart. You don't know.
Well, I'd like to use the last 10 minutes to talk about like the future. Vest is doing something pretty cool. It's like the stock market of music. How do you see sort of AI and blockchain coming into play? I mean, there's going to be AIs creating music.
There already is.
Yeah, right. And blockchain allows for the removal of intermediaries. That's going to happen. What do you see?
A couple of things. I think things are going to happen faster, right? In terms of payments coming back, in terms of content being distributed globally. I think those two things you're already seeing it, but you'll be able to get music out much quicker to a much wider audience. You'll be able to be paid on a much more frequent basis. You're seeing publishers like Cobalt, I know YouTube, I know Sound Exchange are paying all monthly. That's much different than quarterly or semi-annually. And when you're a starving artist, that makes a big difference, right? Waiting 6 months to get your check versus waiting, 6 days to get your check. That's a huge determinant and maybe where your career is. I do think that the direct to fan relationship, again, brought out a little more by the NFTs of late, but other platforms that are doing that as well, will allow artists to actually support themselves more readily. They're not dependent upon a label or a publisher signing them. They can go out and engender and engage that fan base in a way that even if it's 10,000 fans paying $1 a piece, that's $10,000, right? And you can survive on a very modest level of fan engagement if they're really engaged. So I think those opportunities are growing much more quickly. I think the labels will change a little more. I think they're already becoming hit factories. They always were in some sense, but if you're a medium to smaller level artist that requires some sort of development or your potential marketplace is limited, say you're a bluegrass band or you're a banjo artist, I mean, I think those markets are more niche, and I don't think the major labels will spend much time or effort because the home runs pay so much more, and they're focused on big independent or international global acts that have hits versus niche markets. So there will be other labels that focus on that. And I think artists directly they'll use these platforms that are becoming available now. There's hundreds of platforms for musical artists to put their work on, to merchandise, to ticket, to route their tours. I mean, there's so many more aids to running your own business as a musician and creator than there were 5, 10, 20 years ago. So I think the DIY model is actually really, really relevant, and you'll be able to support yourself much more easily on a much smaller fan base than you could with, this major bullhorn that's a label or a publisher.
Yeah, the hard part is discovery, like discoverability, I think. If I put out some music, how are people going to find it? It seems like you need curators. Well, I guess those are disc jockeys.
It used to be disc jockeys, and the labels to a large extent were curating. But you'll see social influencers. I think anybody that's a social influencer and chooses to feature a certain artist or certain song, they're curating in that fashion. Other artists that choose to feature you on their track in that same way we talked about, that's also a curation.
It's like Obama sharing his Spotify list.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's interesting. I had a conversation with a company that creates memes today. I've been having some talks with them, but they're allowing users to generate their own memes from cleared rights, right? So instead of just stealing photos and GIFs, they're already clearing these. They're saying, here's a bunch of stuff from Elvis Presley or whatever. Pick an artist, pick a movie, pick whatever. Here's 25 images. Here's 25, GIFs. And then you can put in whatever titles, whatever audio you want, and then share that. And I know that, that's a very, very popular means of communication. I think kids are entertained by that now and are sharing these little, snippets, or basically, and they could be done as NFTs. So there's a lot of opportunity coming up with these shorter bits of media content that I think are capturing a lot of attention, a lot of time, screen time, especially with kids who, as you've seen, went from long form to medium form to short form to to like minuscule, a 2-second GIF is huge now. I mean, those things are traded and seen by tens of millions of people. So I think what's that?
My attention span isn't that long, 2 seconds.
You're down to half a second. Okay. I get you.
Well,
You're ahead of me.
Does any of this line up with Vest's roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the direct-to-consumer model is something that's really primary there. I also think that more artists understanding they can work without the label or without their publishing structure. They're not waiting on a check from a big company. They're out there engaging themselves. On the other side, I think fans want to be involved. Right before, they were very passive. You just listen to the radio, or you're listening to streaming music. You might go to a concert, but to be involved in the business of music, to share in royalties, to be able to participate. And at some point, I think you're going to see crowdsourced music where you're a stockholder, you're a shareholder in their creativity, right? Maybe it's a crowd-funded recording session where someone says, look, we need 20 grand to go record these 10 songs. And someone steps up and says, I'll give you half that. That guy will give you a third of that. That guy will give you, the remaining portion of it. And all of a sudden you've got a relationship with fans and investors that want to have some participation, but also enjoy that creative communication with you, and maybe can contribute in some fashion.
Aren't people using GoFundMe and Kickstarter for stuff like that?
100%. Patreon, GoFundMe. There's a number of platforms where people are donating and creating these relationships with their fans or potential investors or supporters directly. So I think that's a very valid way to do things. Again, costs are coming down on the production side. Costs are coming way, way down on the distribution side, if any. So marketing is the key. Like you mentioned, the curation portion. How do I find something? How do I find what's relevant that I like? And I think once that's more finely woven into the social networks that we all share, that part even gets easier.
Interesting. Makes me think of open source in the software world. Sort of cleared right.
It's coming. And I think when you could track each stem, each contribution, Josh Fries is a friend, and I was speaking to him about drum tracks, and he recorded for Apple in GarageBand. There's a drummer, he doesn't know what name he's under. They use these avatars, but I think he submitted to them, a number of drum tracks. And if you go into GarageBand and choose drums and you want to put them in your song, you're actually using stuff that he recorded. They made a one-time payment to him. But I said, Josh, what happens if you could actually participate forever in the value of that recording? In other words, you put up, a snare hit or a flam, and it's used by 10,000 people. And maybe you're getting 0.00001 cent every time it's used or streamed. Or maybe a big artist takes it, or one of those people that use it blows up on a viral video and it's seen by 10 million people. And now you've got 10 million times 0.00001. And not only did they use your snare hit, they used your cymbal crash and your hi-hat. I mean, that's, I think, where this music business goes, right? When you can compensate creators and artists directly and quickly for their work, however small it is, as it's mixed into the fabric of music on a global basis.
Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. Well, we only have 1 minute left. Kirsten, take us home.
I'm just excited for the fact that you guys are able to separate out the layers. So it's like the drummer, the writer, all the stuff that I can, in my future songwriting career, which won't exist, I can then rest easy knowing that I'll get all the credit for the songs I'm not going to write. Because a million, anything times by zero, still zero. So yes.
Listen, you could hand clap, and that's a legitimate, piece of art on a recording and earn a royalty for that. You could play glockenspiel. I wouldn't limit yourself and say you can't, because I think you can. It's just where, right? And who will utilize that? And you never know.
Jacking for beats. Ice Cube.
There you go. All right, that'll be my new That'd be my life's quest, is getting the dumbest thing ever tracked and played over and over. So I can be like, you know, that weird sound at the beginning of that commercial? And everyone goes, yeah, that was me. I want a moment like that. I won't lie. I would love a moment like that.
Keep working, Kirsten. It can happen.
But the dumber, the better. So it's got to be the dumbest story. Like, we're talking like Romy and Michelle Post-it note. Like, that's the level I'm going for here.
I'm telling you, the meme thing is going that way, right? Someone going, ah! that becomes a very popular sound and is used tens of millions of times. And once you can start to monetize that, that's huge.
Interesting.
Your dog's trying. Your dog really wants it.
He's monetizing right now. He's out there creating a meme.
Well, it feels like we just scratched the surface. There's more clearly to discuss here, but we'll have to pick it up in a future episode when you come back, Steve.
Anytime, Joe. I was your first guest, I think, right?
You unofficially, yes.
I kind of like photobombed. I LinkedIn, what's this? Zoom bombed you guys.
You Zoom bomb. That's right.
Zoom bomb.
But you kept on all your clothes, and I wanted to thank you for that.
It is
All
a
right,
roulette, man. Come on.
It's not too late. So fantastic. Well, as always, Steve, it's fascinating to chat with you, and we really must do it more frequently.
Anytime. Love you guys. And I'm happy to be here anytime you want me, Joe. Kirsten, thank you.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank everyone out there in the metaverse.
All 5 of you. Thank you.
Yes. It's I think we got to 4 today.
Woo!
Yeah, it's not about live, it's about the long tail with WorkDoneLive.
Game.
Yes. So we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you again, Steve. Thank you, Kirsten. And we'll see you all again, or at least you'll see us in 2 weeks' time. When I think we've got an interesting topic on spirituality in the future of work. So,
Ooh.
yeah, exactly.
Namaste.
No holds barred. All right. Hey, thanks, everyone. Everyone take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye.